Players, welcome back. I am Mini Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War, and the Kings and Raiders update for SFO Grimhammer 2 is halfway done. So today, we're going to take a look at the Tomb Kings side of this upcoming Norsca vs. Skelly Boys conflict, and show off some of the new mechanics and units you can expect when this thing eventually goes live, which should hopefully drop before the Wood Elves and Skaven Lord pack sometime in October. Now, I'm of the mind that the Tomb Kings are pretty low on the list of factions in need of content and reworks, especially in comparison to their Game 1 counterparts. I think they're one of the few races Creative Assembly got completely right on the first try. Their unit roster, lords, and campaigns are all in good shape. Nothing glaring was cut or missing, and they're pretty well fleshed out, despite being spooky, scary skeletons. And because of that, I don't expect Creative Assembly to do anything that affects them until Warhammer 3, when I suspect Nagash and Neferata will make their plays for power, which should have a pretty large impact on their campaigns and how they'll approach expansion, but that's still a long ways off. In the meantime, Venris can afford to put some resources into Cetra and the boys, because the useful element of being a modder is you tend to work faster than the devs themselves. You don't have all that red tape to cut through and quality assurance to worry about. So, in SFO, most of the races in severe need of help have already gotten it, like the Beastmen, Dwarfs, and Wood Elves, all in bad shape in vanilla, but in great shape overall in SFO. So yeah, while they may not truly need anything, the Tomb Kings that is, it doesn't mean they can't be improved, and it's been a very long time since they got anything noteworthy, so here we are. It makes a lot of sense, considering Cetra's history with the Chaos Gods, his invasion of the far north to recover the crown of Nakara, and the Battle of Hellworm Glacier to match them up against Norsca in a 2-for-1 update. They have some unfinished business with each other, so here we go. And to get things kicked off, there's a new unit called the Tomb Bark, integrated with permission from Chaos Roby, who's been a god of modding over the last year or so. He has unleashed some amazing unit mods, and this one is integrated straight from his own work. This is a magical chariot and missile platform meant as a support unit on the front lines, kind of like a Mortis engine with archers up top. Grants a constant ward save to allies, lets out swarms of Kepra beetles that steadily drain enemy HP alongside some hefty debuffs, and can do a bit of killing in CQB and from range as well. It's not particularly survivable, very low melee defense and armor with a relatively unimpressive health pool, so it can be taken down by missile fire or gooning from monsters easily enough. Grand Hierophant Katep and the Exiles of Nehet gain exclusive access to them as unique mounts for his Lich High Priest in campaign, which is pretty dope. And the only sad thing about the centerpiece unit is that the Tomb Guard riding it up top are in denial that they're actually dead. Remember fams, denial isn't just a river in Egypt. Now if you were paying attention, you might have just heard me say Lich High Priests. Yes indeed, we are getting more caster lords in Warhammer 2, which is awesome. Something that needs to be rectified across a wide variety of races in the base game. Beastmen are missing their Great Bray Shamans, making Malagor their only Lord level caster, which is trash. Norsca has exactly 0 Lord caster options, generic or legendary, which is even worse somehow, and the Tomb Kings are lacking Lord level casters as well. But not anymore. Thankfully that's been addressed with the Lich High Priest here, with access to Shadow, Nakara, Light, and Death Magic, and their dual casters in campaign. Which stands to reason that millennia-old mages might have a fairly good grasp on magic. Now, we've gotten a taste of this already with Legions of Legend, but for better or worse, in customary SFO fashion, that mechanic is being taken a step and a half further. If you guys remember when the end times dropped more slib on our heads, every major race in the setting got more than a dozen unique regiments to help flesh out the story, to give it a bit more character, something it was sorely lacking. And for the Tomb Kings, most of those elite veterans have made it in one way or another, as a core component of one of the main features of this campaign overhaul. As we know, scattered throughout ancient Nakara are famous landmark pyramids, some of which have super nice bonuses when you finish building them. Some are map-wide, some grant you really nice boons to your economy, some give you canopic jars, all that stuff. Well, now you have even more reason to invest in landmarks, because once you finish a long-lost pyramid, you can recruit a certain number of Tomb Kings legions from that pyramid that are tied to that specific location. Units like the Xandri Black Shields, the Marat Guard, the Krokagar Legion, and so on. And these are all highly specialized regiments for a specific battlefield role. In the Halls of Nagash, you can recruit the Nagashizar Guard and the Green Skulls, the Simps of Neferata. Simp quickly became a stupidly overused word, like cuck or incel. I don't think people even know what those words mean, and frankly, the world would probably be a much better place if they were never introduced in our lexicon in the first place. But simp is a very good word to describe the swains of Lamian vampires, and in the case of the Green Skulls, these were the adoring bodyguards of one Duke of Paravon, who spent his life desperately trying to please Neferata, before she eventually grew bored of him, sucked him dry, did not give him the blood kiss, and then enslaved his army, scouring them in eternal witchfire. Which should be a good lesson for all you degenerates watching Pokimane streams and Belle Delphine content on TikTok. No, she does not care about you, and no, she will not privately show you her elbow because you donated $10. Anyways, at the Black Pyramid, you can recruit the Sepulchrex themselves, the towering Ushabti slaves of Nagash, bearing the graven visage of the pantheon he cast down, and each of these legions are capped, so you cannot spam them, but you can get some pretty flavorful armies going once you start reconquering each of their home provinces, and in general you can recruit at least 6 to 7 of each of these regiments, barring a few examples. Now all Tomb King's legendary lords start with a unique legion unit in their army as well. Khalida has her Legion of the Asp, Arkan has the Whites of Stonewrath Tarn Graveguard, Cetra with his Hawk Legion, and Katep with the Sphinx Legion of Numas. And it's little touches like that, playing Pokemon as you conquer the world, that can keep you invested in a campaign past the point where you would normally get pretty bored. I think it's a nice addition overall. Now, as I've already stated, I don't think there's a whole lot to complain about when it comes to vanilla Tomb Kings campaigns, especially when so many other races have been playing in the gutter for 3 years, but one mechanic I would have really enjoyed CA taking a step further is the tech tree, and in particular, the awakening of the dynastic lords. In their current form, they have some pretty cool buffs to specific units, but there's nothing that marks them as special outside of that. One of the best ways to improve them going forward is to give them unique visuals, stats, mounts, and battlefield identities, which is exactly what's happening in Kings and Raiders. So Thutep, Lamizash, Wakaf, Setep, and the other dynastic kings start with their own mounts now. Their own stat line, their own skill trees that match up with the units they buff in campaigns. So essentially, they're all mini legendary lords now, instead of generic noobs nobody cares about. For example, Thutep is the construct lord that makes Ushabti crazy strong, if I remember correctly. I could be misremembering that, but I think he's the one that gives them attack and defense for the Ushabti, and he starts out on a Kemrian War Sphinx with auras that benefit other constructs as well. So there's obviously a lot of synergy there. But legendary lords are at the very core of what makes Mortal Empires interesting, so I played 40 turns with Khalida and 40 turns with Arkan the Black to get a better grasp on these mechanics. Now for Arkan the Black, Mr. Mortarch of Sacrament and Nagash's #1 henchman, he still starts on the Sorcerer's Islands off the western coast of Araby, but I personally wanted to try out a new start in Nagashi Zar for thematic sake. It's actually a pretty garbage start position until you get to tier 5 and build the Great Halls, at which point you can kind of snowball out of control, I would imagine. I've not played that far into it, but it's an incredibly good building, which is why I wanted to start there, but you don't get it until tier 5, so you gotta play like good 60, 70, 80 turns. But there's just something about having a cackling necromancer lair hidden from enemies that's very appealing, and so I wanted to try it out. But besides the start in Nagashi Zar, Arkan has some pretty damn cool stuff, whether you start on Nagashi's home turf or back in Araby. He now has access to Karen Race, Crypt Horrors, and Mortis engines in a new building chain, on top of the Hex Race, Dire Wolves, Fellbats, and Crypt Ghouls he already had access to. All followers of Nagash Lords now have buffs for undead units, not just Arkan, and he has unique skills that buff vampiric units map-wide as well. So you are heavily encouraged to rock the Undead Legions aesthetic, rather than just go full Tomb King stuff as you kind of used to do. And that one of the problems with Arkan's campaign currently in vanilla is that most of the units you have that are vampiric in nature, you phase out almost immediately because you don't need Fellbats and Crypt Ghouls past like turn 20. As soon as you start getting these higher tier Tomb King stuff, it no longer matters. With this though, you've got Crypt Horrors, you've got Mortis engines, you've got Karen Race, and these are much higher tier units that you can use late into the campaign, and SFO has faction-wide caps anyway, so you're forced to use rank and file. You can't just spam tier 5 troops to victory. Not to mention Spectral units have perfect vigor and higher healing caps here, so they're already quite a bit better than you'd expect. As I stated, he starts his playthrough with the Whites of Stonewrath Tarn Graveguard Regiment, and has 2 additional unique Legion units, the Glowing Ghouls and Nagashi Zar Guard. His skill tree is absolutely massive, and he feels very distinct from the other Tomb Kings lords, which is exactly what you want. I won't show them all here, but each legendary lord has a unique section in their tech tree too. For Arkan, you get cool bonuses for each of the Great Pyramids you bring back online and turn in service to Nagash, and for Khalida, things get really interesting because of her vampire hunt mechanic and special resource. So as we know, Khalida and her deity Asaf absolutely despise vampires. She's kind of the torchbearer for the motto, "Don't tread on Snick, get off my lawn, you dirty vampire hoes," and of course, that's all because of her rivalry with Neferata and proximity to Lamia. She has a new mechanic here, where her tech tree can spawn powerful vampire armies in adjacent settlements as the Cult of Asaf roots them out and forces them into the open. And as she kills them, or any of the legendary lords back in Sylvania like Vlad or Manfred, she generates a resource called Vengeance. Vengeance can be spent on unique map-wide bonuses on her tech tree, or they can be accumulated to permanently boost her combat potential into insane territory. So she'll get Stalk at Vengeance level 6, Unbreakable at level 9, extra special soft poison that deals even more damage at level 12, all the while racking up pretty dirty stat boosts that allow her to kill vampires more easily over time. And these stats really do rack up like crazy. Like the other lords, her own skill tree has quite a few reworks here as well. The Sacred Spawning of Asaf, allowing her to summon anti-infantry necroserpents from the earth, and she begins her campaign with an elite poison archer regiment that specializes in taking out infantry-sized targets, called the Blessed Legion of Asaf. I have not gotten a chance to play with Katep or Cetra yet, but I can show you a brief overview of what's new with them too. And for Katep, you start with a dilemma that lets you choose between 4 major faction-wide effects. Basically the same thing as Gromerdal, but one's an economic boost with the Canopic Jars and better global recruitment capacity at the expense of worse local recruitment cap. Another is focused on buffing Winds of Magic and growth while lowering armor and leadership for your armies. The third option lets you tech up and improve public order while massively increasing unit caps across the board, while buildings take 50% longer to construct. And the final option improves movement range, casualty replenishment rate, and favors aggressive expansion, even granting regeneration for your entire army, but lowering leadership for your armies when you're at home defending. These refresh every 40 turns and allow you to tailor your expansion or turtling to fit whatever needs you have at that point in the campaign. His Canopic Jar section of the Mortuary is quite a bit larger than his contemporaries, allowing him to trade for gold or instantly replenish all of his armies map-wide, and like I said earlier, can mount his hero and lord level casters on tomb barks too. So he has a lot of cool stuff. I would say right now Katep's campaign looks like it'll be a lot more fun in SFO than it is in vanilla. And finally, we have Cetra the Imperishable, O King of Kings, who has a stupidly large and incredibly good skill tree, as we would expect, a stat line amongst the best in the setting, as we'd expect, and of course, Perwyn Rommel, the War Kitty, in his starting army, as per usual. He starts with the Hawk Legion of Cetra as well, bonus versus infantry skeleton warriors with a mean stat line. It's like 45-45, so way better than regular skeleton warriors, and a new resource called Divine Riches, which you can earn as post-battle loot. These spoils of war can be spent on map-wide buffs from a dilemma every 25 turns, and on 22 new technologies as well that each lower the cooldown of Awaken abilities that each Tomb Kings unit now has. These Awaken abilities represent their infantry and constructs getting into the flow of battle and remembering their past lives better the more they fight, as they settle into a bit of a groove. They all start on cooldown for 5 minutes, 300 seconds, but come online as passives and active abilities as the battle rages on. And even though they're kind of powerful and cool in some cases, relatively thematic, this is probably the one thing in the update I don't really like, and it's maybe the biggest issue facing SFO Grimhammer right now. Unit and ability bloat is absolutely a huge problem for SFO, at least from my perspective, and has been for quite some time. And it's simply a side effect of this being Venerus' job and the speed at which his team works. People expect new content to keep things fresh and interesting, so he constantly has to reinvent the wheel and come up with new mechanics, new abilities, and new features and new units. But some of that is a little bit limited on what you can do on the modding side as opposed to being a developer, so he kind of has to work with what's already in the game. And even though I think the vast majority of what he puts in fits in the setting, and that it's reasonable and logical to add, when you combine all of it together, it starts getting a little bit ridiculous. Not every unit needs special buffs and traits and active abilities. A skeleton spearman is a skeleton spearman, It doesn't need anything special to differentiate it from the rest of the pack. Ushabti don't need special abilities. They're monstrous infantry statues that kill things in melee. Their animations and stat line are what makes them special, not some artificial bonus. And I think it's the fact that this mod constantly has to one-up itself that can kind of lead to some janky and out-of-place additions. And more than that, it just makes it hard for people to get into in some cases because there's just so much that gets introduced every single time a new update rolls out. And we long ago left the realm of being able to balance and address everything properly in a mod this large. I personally feel like these new unit abilities don't need to be in the game at all. I don't think the Awaken abilities for Tomb Kings units really do anything to improve it overall. I don't think they're necessary, and honestly, it just kind of feels like bloat. And so I feel like Cetra's mechanics are maybe a bit underwhelming on paper because they revolve around lowering the cooldown of a bunch of abilities that I don't actually like, that I don't actually think should be in the game. But with the improvements to his skill tree and scaling bonuses when fighting against Chaos, he's still probably worth a playthrough. I just think the others got better stuff. And I think Khalida, Katep, and Arkan the Black certainly have a lot to offer in this update. But yeah, overall, I'd say this patch has added a bunch of really cool features and mechanics. It's most certainly improved the Tomb Kings lords and their respective campaigns in a variety of ways. And after 80 turns or so of playing, I'm pretty happy with what I've seen so far. The Norsca part of the update has only just begun, I believe, but hopefully we'll be seeing what's new on that side of things before the Wood Elves get their official DLC, which should be dropping in October, but with everything else going on, who the hell knows? Could get pushed to November or even December, I really have no idea. And I am quite curious to check out what's in store for their side of the update, because Norsca could use some huge improvements when it comes to their interaction with the Mortal Empire's campaign map. They were very fun in Warhammer 1. I still love their roster, but there's a lot that needs to be done for their campaign in Mortal Empires. There really hasn't been a seamless transition for them at all. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the upcoming Kings and Raiders update for SFO Grimhammer 2. Once more news is out on the Norsca front, I will probably cover that as well, and I will see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.